If you guys are just coming in, this part of the video is going to be on our EXOCharts walkthrough part 2. If you haven't already, go back and watch part 1. It's going to be posted on our YouTube. And the first part, we went over how I use Delta on EXOCharts and also how I use the volume profile on EXOCharts. So in this part of the walkthrough, it's going to be pretty short, but I'm going to go over how I use the tick chart. I'm using tick 230 for my scalping. And hopefully we can get some live examples here on the video as well. So first things first, why I use the tick chart. The tick chart looks for very small movements in Bitcoin's price action. And with the tick chart, I also use the Delta cluster. So on the format here, you've got a bunch of different ways you can look at this. I use the Delta cluster. You can also use the Delta ladder. It looks the same, but it makes it a little smaller. But I use the Delta cluster. It gives it a nice clean look on the greens being the up bars and the red being the down bars. And then also on my screen here, I have the CPL set as the DOM cluster and the CPR set as the volume profile. This is set as the volume profile for the current day, not the previous day. I also have the volume on the bottom, and then I have the delta bars, the CVD session on the bottom as well. This is a little hard to see, but why I put this on the bottom here is I want to see what is the overall CVD of the current session. Are we bullish? Are we bearish? Is it above zero? Is it below zero? Are we trending upward? Are we trending downward? I like to see those kind of things. So typically, if we are in like a bullish session, like we currently see on the tick chart, and it's trending upward, you could see these very clean higher lows being put in, which I'll talk about here in a second. Typically, you'll see a bullish CVD as well. And if they're trending in the same direction, that's usually a good sign that you want to be buying the dips and you don't want to be focusing on like selling the rallies or looking for big shorts. Because if the CVD is climbing with the overall price action, you can see here that it's kind of telling you this isn't the best scenario because this one is below zero, so it's bearish. If this kind of pattern was above zero and it was bullish, this would be a very good scenario that you would want to be buying these little dips here. But what I was talking about earlier is one thing that I like to do on this tick chart on EXOCharts is I like to zoom out to basically as far as it will let me, where I can actually look at the data. And then I like to see the overall tick trend. And typically, it's actually very interesting how well Bitcoin likes to continue on its tick trends. So I can't draw on this. EXOCharts doesn't have a drawing tool, but I can use a snipping tool here to kind of give you an idea. But it's very crazy how often this likes to follow its trends. So it made a higher low here, which kind of broke this trend. But then all of these trends here were along this same tick trend. So like if you could draw a trend line, it becomes very obvious where these dips are being bought. And we've seen this go on for hours. So this is only from like 10:30 to 3:30. So this is for like 3 hours. This will go on for hours, sometimes days, if the tick trend is very strong. So make sure if you're using my technique and you're looking at the tick chart to zoom out, get a good understanding of where your tick trend is, and kind of get an idea of which way you're trending. And it becomes very obvious when the tick session is making lower highs or higher lows. Like we can see here that the tick trend was very bullish. You can see that the tick trend was very bullish. We are maintaining kind of this bullish structure. You broke this kind of interior trend back into the exterior trend, but then you continued higher, and then you tried to find support, but then you failed. And then look at what you did. You had a trend reversal here, and your ticks started trending downward, lower high, lower high. Then you had a kind of a fork here, even lower high. Then you nuked. You can easily see on the tick trend, if you zoom out, which way your price action is trending. Now you can do this on like a candlestick chart as well. So like if you wanted to do this on like a 1 minute or something, it's kind of the same thing. You can see how the tick chart is very similar to like the 1 minute chart. But there are many times that the tick chart will pick up these trends that are not as clear on the lower time frame charts, like the 1 minute, the 5 minute. So the tick chart will show you kind of those little hidden trends. And more often than not, I have seen it break the trend on like the 1 minute, and you'll start to kind of trend a lot choppier, but it will be much cleaner on the tick chart. So you can compare them, but it's very similar. Okay, so that's one thing that I like to do. I like to zoom out and find the trends. And then also, if you guys are familiar with my accumulation distribution technique or my point of origin technique, I like using those techniques on the tick chart as well. Now, obviously, like I said, I can't draw on the chart, so it makes it a little difficult. You kind of have to visualize it. But for example, so let me see if I can find you an example here. Okay, so actually, this live example is perfect. So if you guys are familiar with my techniques, I like to look for kind of where these impulse moves originated from, right? So if we have a massive impulse move down, I like to see where did that originate from? Where is the point of origin of that move? And what you would see here is if you're doing that technique, you would see that this is the point of origin of that failure. That's that last little support before you started impulsing down, right? So if you're using this technique, you're going to find some resistance around that level, right? So that point of origin is going to be some resistance. It's also going to be a nice little target if you are trading the bottom here. So like if you like buying the bottom or buying the dip, that is a very good long-term target for your trade, right? So if you use my accumulation technique, you would see that we're putting in a low, we're putting in a high, and we kind of have that accumulation, right? And we have the low tested, and then we have the high tested. It pulls back to about the middle of the range, and then you find support off the middle of the range, and then you break out to the upside. So this is a very good long signal here. So if you took this long signal using my accumulation technique, you could have targeted this little cluster right here using my point of origin technique. And as you can see, it's very evident where the accumulation is, where the point of origin is on the tick chart. That's one way that I like to use it. Another way is, I don't know if I have any live examples here. The trend is a little too strong. Let me see if I can find some examples before I go into this next part. So here's a slight example, but it fails. So another thing that I like to do is, it's kind of like the point of origin technique, where I look for this massive change in momentum, right? So we have this kind of accumulation, and then we're shifting into an uptrend, right? So I like looking for where was that first place where it started finding resistance. So you have a little bit of clusters here and here. On the tick chart, you can see how it turns red a little bit. And then you have a big cluster here. This would be like the first major pullback, right? So I like finding where that first major pullback was after that shift in momentum. And that will typically give you a very good continuation point, like we kind of see here. It doesn't go as deep as I would like. Typically, I would like it to retrace into that zone before going higher. So it will give you that continuation point, and it will also give you a support if we start to curl back downward into that support. So I don't think this one was tested very... Actually, it was tested a few times, but it wasn't as clean. So you can see here that you have that first little pullback of that impulse. So this would be like your support, right? You're not tested as well as I would like. Like I said, I like it going a little bit deeper into that pullback, and then it finds support, and then it bounces out of it. But you do front run it a little bit, and then it nukes it. But this is a good example here. So if you were bearish and you were waiting for a good signal to short, this is a very good example on the tick chart because this is your first major pullback of that trend shift, right? So that's going to give you that kind of continuation zone, or it's going to give you that pivot zone. And typically, if you guys have the OTS, this will typically be a pivot. So you guys can see that on the indicator. But so we have that zone for continuation or for a failure. And what do we see here? We fail it, we pull back to retest it, and then it nukes right after retesting it. So if you were bearish and you were waiting for a good signal, that's a good signal on the tick chart. You see that little bit of support come in, and then you nuke it. That's another technique that I like doing on the tick chart. And then one of the other techniques that I like to do is using the volume profile levels, like the daily value area low, the POC, the value area high. I'm not going to go over it too much because, like I said, it's just typically, it's just standard volume profile techniques. So if you guys understand my volume profile video, or I talked about a little bit in my first EXOCharts video, those volume profile techniques, I do the same thing using the tick chart as well. One good example of those techniques is if you are in a low volume scenario. So like if we're seeing a distribution or just a accumulation or a sideways trend, if you're seeing a low volume scenario, the daily value area high and the daily value area low and the POC, these are going to be basically where your range is on your low volume scenario. So typically in low volume scenarios, there is not enough momentum to break the value area high or break the value area low. When you attempt to do so, you'll typically pull back towards the POC. That is a very common technique for volume profile traders. And using the tick chart, you can really see how price is reacting to those levels. So like in today's volume profile, we're pretty balanced. We have a pretty balanced volume profile. We don't have very much volume. Let me see what the volume's like. Because the tick volume is pretty standard. But let's look at the actual volume. Oh, I could pull this up on Delta. Actually, no, we do have a lot of volume here. So this would not be the best scenario to sell the value area high because we do have a lot of volume. So if this was a lower volume scenario, kind of like we saw here, where you have the very low volume, 17 million, 20 million, nothing too high. During those scenarios, it's a good place to look to sell the value area high and buy the value area low. But okay, so a couple other things before we end the video. I do have a couple other techniques here. So what I like to see is currently what we're seeing now. So if I'm looking for a scalp, let's say I'm looking for a long here. Pay very close attention to your order book over here. This will shift into whatever direction price is moving, and it will become very obvious where the orders are flowing. Now, let me see if I can catch this live. Let's see if it wants to break out here. I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. You see how the blue is getting thicker and thicker, and the red is kind of not fighting back? That is typically what you want to see during a breakout or a bottom. You want to see the blue, which is the buy side, become very thick and bright and start to break out into the sell side, and vice versa if you're bearish. So let's see if this is a strong breakout. You will see this flip very bright, and this will become very dark. This will not be shaded in as light. We'll see if it happens. Okay, you see this? It's getting brighter and brighter while the order book is getting weaker and weaker on the sell side. Now you have to be careful because it can fake out a lot, so you have to kind of wait and see if it's real or fake volume. If it's real, it will stay bright as you're pushing higher. If it's fake, it will go bright, it will break out, and then it will disappear. So if you like trading swing failure patterns, it's actually a very good way to catch swing failure patterns. You'll see it get very bright, it will break out, and then it will disappear on the buy side. The sell side will get very strong, and it will nuke it. Yeah, so Exo is, most of their stuff is free. You have to pay for certain things. I'm not exactly sure what is in their paid system and what is in their free system. You would have to look into that. I'm not exactly sure on that. So like right now, if you were looking for this kind of double top scenario, where you see on the 1 minute we had kind of like a double top, 5 minute is currently breaking out. Hold on, let me catch this, make sure it's not breaking out. So I'm going to show this on EXOCharts so I don't miss it. But we currently have like a double top scenario, right? On the EXOCharts. It's almost like a cup and handle. This is where you really want to see that buy pressure coming in on if you're scalping, or even if you're long-term trading. If you're looking at the tick chart here and you're looking at the cluster, this really needs to start getting bright and you want to start seeing some buy pressure. We're currently not seeing that buy pressure. It is consolidating on that high, but you're not seeing the buy pressure. You see how it's starting to get thicker on the sell side? That's because the sellers are trying to hold this down. If the sellers get beat here, this will disappear and this will buy right into it. Is the blue coming down? Yes, so the blue, you can see how the blue is getting a little lower and the red side's getting a little thicker. That's because the sellers are trying to hold this down. If you see this thick blue push higher and this red disappears, that's when the breakout will occur. You can actually catch it. It's very quick, but if you're scalping, you can actually catch it before it happens. Would I short here? You could short here without confirmation. You would have to have a very tight stop loss, though. I'd probably give it like $20. So like if you were scalping here, you could short this, put your stop loss above the daily value area high and above kind of where your resistance is. So around like 80, 40, 80, 45. It's not confirmed though. If we started to find that sell pressure, that would be better. But the problem is, if you look at this on like a minute chart or like a real candlestick chart, it's a hard short. It's a hard short because you are seeing a lot of buy pressure. So one thing to note is the CVD is flipping bullish now. You see how the CVD is flipping bullish? It's positive 4 million. So like I was telling you guys earlier, when you have that strong uptrend, my mouse wheel is not cooperating. When you have that strong uptrend in price on the tick chart and that strong uptrend on the CVD and it's positive, that's a very, very bullish day. And you typically want to be buying the dips on a day like that. This is starting to look very bullish. You can see the order book is pushing higher. You don't have like really any sell momentum. There's like no volume though, so this could go either way. This is a hard trade. I'd say it's more bullish than bearish. You see how this, look at this. You see the sell book, the sell side? The offers are starting to get weak and weak. Now look at that. You see it? Now it's flashing blue. It's taking the sell side. The sell side is being beaten now. Do you see what the order book does? It makes it very obvious which side is being pushed. And when you have like big buy walls or big sell walls come in, so like when that 40 mil buyer was coming in all the way up back a few weeks ago, a few months ago, you could watch what he was doing to the order book. He would come in, he would put his order not up here, but he put it like a little bit lower, so somewhere around here, and then the offers would just vanish. They would get so scared of his buy wall that they would just vanish. And then the buyers, all the retail guys, would start putting their bids above his buy wall. And then he would push the price up and then it would fail downward. But when you have buyers or sellers like that, it's very easy to see what they do to the market when you're using this tick chart technique. You see how they're getting stronger and stronger? Think of this as like the front lines. Like if this is a battleground, these are like the front lines. The front lines are getting thicker and thicker towards the buy side, and they're getting weaker and weaker towards the sell side. If this wants to break out, you will see it. I won't have to alert you guys. You guys will see it. It'll become very obvious. Okay, here we go. You have about 4 million on the buy side now. You see how the sell side's getting weak. There's just no buy volume right now. The biggest problem. You're also at the daily value area high. So like I said, when there's low volume, it's very hard to break this level. You need volume to break this level. If you have a balanced volume profile, the high and the low of the value area, extremely hard to break on low volume. So if the volume does not come in here, you can see the volume down here. Look at how weak the volume is. If the volume does not come in here, you will fail to break the value area high. Look at the CVD though. Look at the CVD. So it looks like we're not really doing anything. The delta has already gained 2.3 million. Well, now it's failing. It already gained 2.3 million since the last time that I said something. So look at the volume. This is what I was talking about. You have low volume. You're not able to break the value area high on low buy volume. The sellers will protect this level. So right now, if you were who I was talking about earlier, if you're someone who likes to short kind of without confirmation, this is where your short would be okay. Now obviously it's still a risky short because there's no confirmation, but that little signal right there, that would have been where you short if you're a risky trader. And there you go. So the risky short was actually the good play there. So do you guys see what I mean? Did you guys see what happened on the left side? The buyers get very weak. Look at what's happening. The thick red is pushing the buyers down. There is no thick blue to protect the price. Will asks, do you ever look at open interest on EXOCharts? Not really. I don't really care about open interest. I've never been a person who trades based on that. But okay, so that was a very good live example because you guys were able to see that you were trying to break into a new high, but you had no volume, right? You had no volume. It was very hard to break the daily value area high on no volume. And you saw that before that started to nuke, what did you see on that tiny little, those two little bars right there? Those two little tick bars. You saw the volume spike up and engulf the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like all of these bars have no volume. That little 2 bar there had more volume than all of them. Not combined, but their peaks. It had more volume than all of their peaks. So that showed you that the sellers were protecting that level. Will ask, the daily value area high would be considered the first trouble area. Yeah, so depending on what kind of profile you have, if it's like a balanced profile, the value area high is going to be a very strong sell point. The sellers are going to protect that level. Now, depending on if you have like a B shape or a P shape, it's a little different. The sellers will still protect it, but it's not going to be as aggressive. So now the CVD is flipping back to the bear side. Now this could still go up. This could still give you like a cup and handle. You can still use like candlestick techniques with the tick chart. It's a little difficult, but overall techniques, kind of like the cup and handle technique, you could still look for that. But if you took that short there, you'd be okay right now. Your stop loss is like, what, $50 away, $40 away. You're in a decent scalp. Why the gap? It's just a it's a thing with the delta cluster. So there wasn't really any buyers there, so there's kind of a gap. It just sold right through it. Kind of like right here, it bought right through it, sold right through it. The gaps are they're not of big importance. I don't pay very much attention to them. But okay, so far, if you took that short, like I said, it was a little risky. Wasn't a lot of confirmation. Now this would be like where your confirmation is starting to come in, but now you have a weaker stop loss, right? Your stop loss is farther away. So it's really how do you want to trade this? But if you're in this short here, I wouldn't bring your stop loss down. I would leave your stop loss above the value area high. People make this mistake too often where you take that trade, it nukes downward, and you're like, oh, nice, I can just move my stop loss to break even. You don't want to do that, because what happens if it comes back and it retests the value area high? You're going to lose your trade. And then it might fail again. So you don't want to bring your stop loss down. I would say on a tick chart, you want to look for the trends, right? So look at this here. Before I draw it, what do you guys see? You see how clean that trend is? Higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low, all the way up. Very, very clean trend. So if you're in a short here, what do you want to see? You want to see this lose its uptrend. And then start to put in those lower highs. So where I would pull my stop loss down is if we lose that low, right? You see kind of that SR flip right there? You have resistance turn support. If you lose that level, then I would pull my stop loss down into in profit or just lower. Right? So now that you guys saw how the cluster reacts, you're currently still seeing it. You see how the cluster is reacting? Very deep red pushing into that empty space, if you will. Does this make sense to you guys? Do you guys have any questions? As always, guys, if you guys are watching the VOD, if you guys have any questions, put them in the comments. So there you go. Did you see what happened? You see what happened on the cluster? It becomes very obvious. But now the buyers are coming in. Look at the cluster. Now the buyers are coming in. They're trying to protect their trend. They lost their trend a little bit, but they're trying to protect it. Okay, so now that you see the cluster, let's zoom out and look at the trend. I've asked them to add a simple drawing tool, but they haven't added it just yet. It would be very helpful for just having like a pen. But look at that. Now we're losing that trend. So we could still retrace and retest that value area, but if it puts in a lower high here, now you're shifting into a downtrend. Very basic price action techniques. Now, what did I tell you guys at the start of the video? During a low volume scenario, you have the value area high, the value area low, and the POC, right? Those are your three most important levels on your volume profile, right? During a balanced profile. They're still important on the other profiles, but the balanced one is the most important. So, for the balanced profile, when you fail the value area high or you fail the value area low, you're always targeting that POC. So I'm not sure why it's saying the POC is here when the POC is actually here. Might be a little bug, but there's two POCs here. The daily POC is marked here, and then we also have one down here. Like I said, not sure why it's doing that, but the POC of the volume profile is where you want to target. So like if you shorted the value area high, you would be targeting the POC. But yeah, that's it, guys. That's all my techniques for this scalping tick chart. I'm going to end the video here. We'll make some more EXOCharts videos in the future. But I appreciate you guys watching. If you guys have any questions or comments on EXOCharts or how I use EXOCharts, feel free to put them in the comment section on YouTube, and I'll get to them as soon as possible. I'm going to have this highlighted and cut up and put into a much easier video on YouTube pretty soon. But this, if you want to watch the live stream that you're currently watching, it's going to be the same exact video. But all right, guys, if you guys like the content, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will be releasing more videos in the future. Thank you.